here in historic Sistrunk. We are really excited about this program this evening. As you know, our Rosen collection, Steinman collection, has never been on exhibit before, even though it's been here like over 2 decades, and this is the first time we've publicly shown it. So it will be up through December, so we invite you to come back because when we finish this evening, it won't be a lot of time to really delve into them, but we invite you to come back. It'll be here through December. So on behalf of the African American Research Library, I am Dr. Ramona LaRoche. I serve as the supervisor of adult reference, and I'd like to welcome you so much. We're in for a treat tonight. We have some amazing panelists, but before we ask the panelists to come forward, I have asked my beloved community Chief Nathaniel Stiles to bring up our Queen Mother so that she may pour a libation to open us up this night. Thank you.
This is the way to venerate our ancestors. This is the way we deify them, not so much to call them gods, but to thank them and show that we appreciate all that they have done for us to live in. We are ready for them to go back, because they have danced for hours, twirled and spin, they've done all they can. We say, tomorrow, 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 tomorrow.
This is Queen Mother Arite Adefumi. She is the widow of Oba Osejima, King Osejima Adefumi, who was the first African American initiated to the Yoruba Orisha Udum. He was actually initiated in Matanzas. A week ago, his successor, her son, transitioned. So we're going to honor the spirit of Oba King Adefolu Adefumi. We acknowledge his presence, his divinity, and all that he's done for the liberation of African people in the Americas. We honor our ancestors, all the powers that were, that will be, whose old shoulders we stand upon. We say, Iba Ashe. Oh, you have the mic.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. So tonight we are in for an amazing treat. We're here to talk about the exhibit, and we have some people that have had some experience in curation, arts, and cultural heritage. So without further ado, I want to tell you a little bit about Mr. Ludlow Bailey, who has served as our guest curator for the exhibit. Ludlow Bailey is a curator of culture as art, an art broker, writer, and an art advisor. He's extremely passionate about contemporary global African diaspora culture. He currently manages the director of the Contemporary African Diaspora Art, CADA, a multimedia platform designed to present and promote the visual art culture of the African diaspora. Mr. Bailey has traveled extensively throughout the African diaspora and is considered one of the leading experts on contemporary African diaspora art. He is currently working as an art advisor with some of the most important museums and galleries and private collections in London, New York, Paris, Chicago, Cape Town, Washington, D.C., Lagos, Accra, and the Caribbean. He regularly attends many of the world's leading art fairs and museums. He has curated 55 visual art shows in the last decade. He was educated at Brown University, Harvard, Columbia, the American Classical School in Rome, the University of Dakar, the University of Ghana, and the American University in Cairo, Egypt. I welcome Mr. Ludlow Bailey.
Good evening. Ashe, ashe, ashe. I am blessed beyond extraordinary because this is turning out to be a lot bigger than I thought it would be. I was originally thinking we were going to just do a little panel thing and invite some people. And it's really turned into a very spiritual gathering. The Queen Mother's here, Chief is here. Sam Morrison himself is here, the originator of this library. We got to give him a really outstanding salutation. But before I forget, I have to give props to Anthony Bronson. He's one of my clients. He buys art from me, but we wouldn't be doing this without him. So Mr. Bronson, thank you again for sponsoring this event. So of late, I've been really going through a lot of spiritual growth. And the story about how I got the opportunity to curate this show was all coming from the spirit. Now, the biggest show that's ever been, Black show that's been staged in the state of Florida, I did that in 2020 at Art Serve. It was called Roots of the Spirit. Thank you. And it was a diasporic show because that's the way I move. I consider myself a global African. And, you know, we've got a lot of global Africans in this space. So I've always been looking at, I have a degree in philosophy, so I've always been very interested in ideas. And I've always been very interested in living a epic and enchanting life. That's what I've been telling myself. And it so happens that I ended up working for Trans World Airlines. So I had access to a lot of travel. And I've been to 45 African countries in the world. And most of my education comes from travel, for real. I was colonized by the best white people on the planet, I think, or the worst. You know, so I've been working my way out of really trying to become my authentic African self. And the spiritual piece is a big part of it. And so one of my biggest practices now is that I try to do the sunrise as often as I can, because I'm very much into energy, and the Spirit's teaching me a lot about the energetics of manifestation, which is, you know, a big thing for me, at least, because as a person of African descent who's been blessed with experiences of reliving life in a way that's been unbelievable. I mean, I could tell you stories about me going to South Africa and meeting a Zulu princess and ending up in circles that were tremendously beyond my expectations. Presidents of companies and of countries and elders of different traditions. Just been amazing. So I know that this was supposed to happen. Somehow doing the show gave me a chance to look at more traditional art. One of the things that's true about the internet, we don't even, when I was doing research for the show, they don't have a database on us. They don't know anything about us. You know, the mainstream, I can blame it on the Western world, right? Or just the academics in general. You know, they still have sidelined us. I mean, African people are very important. We are the origin of humanity. And, you know, we have so much to offer the world, and the world is in trouble right now. Partially, I believe, because the slavery thing was such a big mistake. The ecosystem in the world is just crazy right now, right? And I think that Black people will play a major role in bringing it back, you know what I mean? I'm a humanist. I think all the people on the planet are Africans, right? Whether they want to admit it or not. But, you know, I'm not looking forward to destruction and violence and any of that stuff. I think we have to move beyond that. And the Black people, we have so much to give in order to bring balance back to the world. So I am so inspired by the people who've agreed to be on the panelists today, because Chief is always traveling. He's never around. So and here's a man that is not necessarily well known. He's got his own village and his people, right? But a huge personality with a lot of information for us. And hopefully he'll share some of it with us tonight, right? I don't want to make this an academic exercise. I want to really have a discussion with you about how you came into your path. And, you know, what are the tools that you would want to share with this audience about what's worked well for you? Because, you know, again, the focus of your kingdoms, he's a chief in two very important kingdoms in West Africa, and he'll talk more about that. I'll definitely let him do that. And then we have Bayunga, who is from the Congo. And the Congo is the richest country on the planet. They got everything, right? And just the Congolese people are amazing. He grew up in Miami, so you know, he's a person that has a lot of information also as a curator. I think the work we do is important, you know, really using art and culture to help empower Black people and to heal us, because we've been messed up. We're traumatized people, right? Even though we're the most resilient, we should be all extinct by now, right? But Black people are amazing. We are amazing people. We're amazing people, you know. And of course, Ramona, another amazing spirit being is what I call her, right? Amazing spirit being, really what she brings to this community. And some of the projects we've done has been really outstanding. So I'm going to ask the panelists to come up, and then the way I want to do it is to have them really talk about themselves for 6 minutes. Is that enough? And then we're going to go into the question, and I'm going to try to moderate a conversation. So Dr. Ramona LaRoche, Bayunga, and Chief Nathaniel Stiles. All right, we'll start with you, Chief.
Good evening, everyone. I am High Chief Nathaniel Stiles, a product of Miami-Dade County Schools, Broward as well. Interesting thing is, it was about 1993. I was preparing to go on a trip to Ghana, actually with Commissioner Sylvia Portier, who at that time was chair of the Broward County Commission. Before I take any major trip, it's been my tradition to have a divination done. And at that time, the colleague was a master of tarot, such as my dear friend Kareem is here tonight. And she told me that I was going to receive a major title. I called friends in Nigeria to say that Muwezi has told me I'm going to receive a major title. So all the Nigerian friends came to Ghana. And lo and behold, within 3 days of my arrival, I received the title, Nana Kweku and Kobiahini II. And I can recall Commissioner Fortier saying, here I am with all these people in this big position, and they didn't give me no title. And the interesting thing is, the title Nana, we say Nene here. And that was from the time I was born, that's what I was called, Nene, spelled the same, pronounced differently. So really, I am truly living my destiny. I began to travel on my own at the age of 5 years old. My mother was one of the first African Americans employed in Eastern Airlines reservations office. And yesterday I was by Eastern, speaking of her. When I got home, I saw my memories on Facebook talking about my experiences in travel. And lo and behold, yesterday was 29 years to the date that she transitioned. So not only did she plant the seeds for travel within me, I'm still doing what she saw me doing. And I truly consider that to be a blessing. After that, I was installed High Chief Otumba Poshumbade in Yoruba land. The Otumba is the right hand of the king. And I, in my walk, both in Ghana and Yoruba land, as well as you saw tonight, we had the Queen Mother of the Oyatunji village, the first Yorubas here in America. So once again, destiny has somewhat brought me full circle. During the time I received the chieftaincy, we were really a team doing fact-finding for this African American Research Library when it was just a concept. And lo and behold, although I've attended many programs, this is the first time that I'm actually addressing an audience here. And once again, I did the work in Africa. I worked with the priests from Benin, the groundbreaking, we consecrated the land. So thank you, Brother Ludlow. Thank you, Sam Morris. We still rise.
Ashe, ashe, ashe.
Good evening. So, where do I come from? I hail from the South Bronx, then South Carolina, and now South Florida. I'm a sixth-generation Gullah Geechee woman. My parents are from Charleston and Georgetown, South Carolina. And although I grew up in New York, I spent every summer from about 4 years old to almost 20 years old with my grandmother in Georgetown, South Carolina. So I always considered myself to be a bicultural woman. New York City, but also the city of Georgetown, although it's pretty country to us. I have been always drawn to the area of the South. Even when I got to be an adult, I was the only cousin that continued to come back and visit my grandmother. Everybody else was like, they weren't feeling Georgetown, but there was something that kept drawing me there. And I too believe in spirit. I was visiting one time, and I'm the family genealogist. And I went to my grandfather, my maternal grandfather's grave site, and his tombstone was kind of crooked. And when I went to straighten it out, it fell and trapped my pocketbook. I took that as a message from my grandfather that I needed to come back to South Carolina. And I did. I packed up my two sons and we moved down. My oldest was 13 and my youngest was 4. And I began to really, really delve into the cultural heritage of South Carolina and where my ancestors had come from. And particularly it was important because my grandfather, growing up, there was a story. You know, we all have stories. Everybody has stories. Our family histories are amazing. And our story was that my grandfather had been killed in a hunting accident. But when I got old enough to start doing that research and going into microfilm and looking for newspapers, lo and behold, Friday, August 13th, 1937, Negro mortally wounded on Waccamaw Neck. That was my grandfather. And that opened up a whole world of really researching my family trajectory. And I've been adding to my healing and our healing collectively ever since. I came to the the Museum Association Caribbean Conference in 2017. It was in Miami, and at the time I had just finished up my doctorate. And we had a tour, and the tour came to the African American Research Library. Lo and behold, did I know that a year later, I would be hired as a librarian in this magnificent place. And as I say it, I have chilly bumps right now because this is a special place. It's a really special place. And I thank you, Mr. Morrison, for taking that lead. We are forever in debt to you. We really appreciate it. I share. So that's what I do. That's my work. And I'll talk more about some of the stuff related to the mass.
Good evening. My name is Bayunga Kyaliuka. I'm the manager of the Ahmad Lozi Gallery at the Marshall L. Davis Senior African Heritage Cultural Arts Center. I'm extremely delighted to be here for many reasons, particularly because my dear friend Ludlow Bailey invited me, and I'm also honored to be in this stage with the other panelists. Chief, it's been a long time. We cross paths every now and then on social media, but it's been a long time since we've really had a chance to sit in front of each other. Doctor, I really appreciate everything that you've been doing, and I can't say enough about what this space now represents. Thank you all for your work. Right now, as the manager of the Ahmad Lozi Gallery, we're basically focused on producing projects that help us connect ties to each other. We have a spectrum of relationships between us all, whether we're from the continental Africa, whether from Europe, North America, the Caribbean, South America. We have this connection, and my goal and the goal of others also is to really show what is that connectivity made of. And so this is why I think that it's important to have as many different voices as possible serving as curators, because all these different voices help contribute to display and showcase what these connections represent. Thank you.
Thank you, Bayanga. So I'm going to ask you a question first, and then we'll open it up to the other panelists to respond to. But as a curator, how do you really see your role within the Black community? What do you think you're doing for them, and why did you choose to become a curator? If you can deal with that issue.
Actually, I've never called myself curator. I've always taken on the moniker that was given to me by Gary Moore, which is exhibition producer. I think that the title of exhibition producer probably fits me more because I am consistently looking to bring on, it's almost as if I'm a mixer in a sense. And so I'm more interested in grabbing hold of the many ideas that others have and to look at them, explore it, and to make sense of what those ideas are and how we can, showcase it.
That's a broader understanding of it, because as I said, when you use the word curator, it's really obviously a European concept, right? But in my mind, it means you are heavily involved in the preservation of our culture.
Absolutely.
And the interpretation of it, right? As a curator, I can tell you, I feel that the work I'm doing is hugely spiritual, because art to me is one of the highest form of spiritual practice.
Correct.
Right? We're dealing with a part of ourselves that goes beyond the physical, right? And as artists, you know that when you're working in that space, you're dealing with, again, a spiritual dimension, right?
Correct.
The imagination is infinite. Imagination, according to Einstein, is even more important than knowledge, right? So playing in that space to me is a very spiritual thing. And so when I'm doing that work, I feel like I'm really working on creating spiritual solutions for our people. Sometimes it's abstract, but not just for Black people, by the way. I'm a humanist, right? So my point of view is that the world's out of whack. And one of the worst things that happened to humanity was the slavery piece. It really threw us out of whack. Even though Black people have continued to be tremendously creative and inventive, right? It just comes with who we are. So to get back to your point, and if you want to follow up on that, Ramona, you can. Yeah, in your role.
Well, I do not consider myself a curator, but many years ago, I'd say probably in the late 90s, I considered myself a cultural documenter. And it's interesting because when I did go to get my doctorate, it was in library and information science, but I received a full fellowship for the Cultural Heritage Informatics Leadership Fellow. And it was, it was my ticket to everything. It was my ability to mesh the technology with my love of cultural heritage, my genealogy, my photography. I do have a fine arts degree in photography, but I used to be an art teacher. So it just was a way of bringing it all together. I mean, to this day, I still, I work in the community also as an art therapist with one of our nonprofits. And I also am really, have been doing like art and recreation therapy in New York City. I worked at Harlem Hospital, right in the midst of the people. I worked there 8 years as an art therapist. So it used to be a joke. If you get a gunshot wound, make sure you go to Harlem Hospital because they know what they're doing. And we're laughing now, but it meant a lot to be able to work. I worked on a rehab ward, and when I went, it was the rehab medicine. I didn't even know what rehab medicine was. Well, that's where if you have a stroke, a spinal cord injury, or an amputation, you go to rehab medicine. So the physiatrists are those type of doctors. And there I worked on an inpatient unit. But the people, when they had strokes, sometimes it was because they weren't eating right, but sometimes it was drug related. Or sometimes when they had amputations, it might have been diabetes, but it might have been intravenous drug use. Or sometimes if you had a spinal cord injury, it might have been a gunshot wound or a car accident. So it was like these variations of things that our people were facing in the midst of Harlem. And I'm talking about like the 80s through the early 90s. Then there was the crack epidemic with crack babies and going up to the nursery and rocking those babies. And it was a time. It was a time. But it really adds to one's compassion to be able to be in touch with your community. And that's why I love being here at Sis Trump, because it's just an extension of who I've been all of my life.
All right, if you can answer that question too, Chief, about you might not see yourself a curator also, but the work you do is all inclusive, I would think.
I would consider myself a cultural producer. That's extended from my teenage years as an actor, Miami Vice, to modeling in Europe, to supplying JCPenney nationally with African merchandise, to working with architects and interior designers, furnishing celebrities homes such as Wesley Snipes, et cetera, and being a visionary, joining an elder, Commissioner Sylvia Portier, and manifesting a vision with seeds planted by Mr. Morrison. So many instances I've been called an Afrocentric Renaissance man.
And you are. Ashe, ashe. And so it is. All right, but to connect this discussion to the exhibition, right? For me, the mask, and I've been told by my Nigerian colleagues that I shouldn't even refer to them as mask, because that's a colonial word, because that's not what their intention is. They're designed to embody a spirit, which is a technology that I'm trying to learn how to use. Because again, the application of that, for example, to me would be, Channeling is something I do all the time, right? And I'm conscious of it. And that consciousness comes from me opening up myself to my African heritage, right? So if all of you could comment on that issue, what is the connection between art and spirituality? And what tools are you gaining from it in terms of building your own life or helping the community or dealing with our trauma as people of African descent? Do you want to take a stab at that?
Well, when I think of art, I look at, we collectively are the embodiment of art. Art within our style of dressing, within our dance, within our embellishment. When you look at the various objects, such as the exhibition, more so than just being art, they're actually embodiments of spirit, culture, and traditions that are representative of subliminal energies within the societies that they originate from.
That makes a whole lot of sense. So how do you use that in your own life, though? When you come to an exhibition like this, right? I know that you are a very elite aesthetician. You know a lot about African culture at its very roots, so that this collection might appear to be simple in some ways. And in some ways, the people who collected it's the Jewish people who collected this work. So one of the problems is that we don't have the provenance of the pieces, right? So it's hard to tell what's behind them. But these, quote, masks are sacred objects. And, they should not be shown the way they are, is what my colleagues tell me. But again, behind that is a technology, like the spirit piece to me is very important in order to build a productive and or a life that's in line with what source energy intended for us, right? Is a spirit piece is really so important. So I'm going to throw that out there for you to respond to what you think of that as an idea.
Most important is for Africans, for indigenous people, art is not simply decoration or adornment. They're vessels of spirit that are used in ceremony and ritual. So never is it simply because it looks beautiful. It's the energy that you're inviting into a space to bring about a healing or balance or to commemorate a historic event. But it's never, I was simply attracted to this piece. It's not sold in that manner traditionally.
And thinking about my own visions and thoughts about the sacred pieces, I was really drawn to the Bakongo mask because the Bakongo, the Gullah Geechee people are direct descendants of the Bakongo people. Margaret Creel's book, Peculiar People, speaks to this. And the Bakongo mask, they also have a third eye piece right in the center of it. And in that center, there are the 4 directions of the sun, or the 4 moments of the sun, which Robert Ferris Thompson talks about in his book, Flash of the Spirit. So those 4 moments of the sun are the morning, the afternoon, the night, and midnight. It's kind of like those times. And I think about, I had a friend who was from St. Helena Island in Beaufort County, and his mother, real strong Geechee woman, she would say, when she first saw you, she would say, "Day clean." She wouldn't say good morning. She would say, "Day clean," because day clean was that first moment of that sun. I'm getting chilly bumps again. The spirit is here. It's here. It's here. I say. So in thinking about those sorts of pieces, and also the universality, when you think about Native Americans and the 4 directions, and you think about how we pour libations in directions, and it's a universal piece. And as Ludlow said earlier, we're all African. So it all comes back. It's a full circle.
Thank you. I wanted to follow up on what you were saying. I too was drawn to the mask that I love all of them. The Nigerian piece that I first saw on the front side, that was really among my favorites. But collectively, there are pieces from the DRC, which is my home country, that I noticed immediately. And so when you say Bakongo, Bakongo refers to a tribal family in the DRC, which was formerly known as Zaire. You have four main tribal groups. Well, you have a lot more than that, but the four largest would be the Bakongo people, the Baluba, Kiswahili, and the Bangala. So more often than not, when you're hearing people speak any languages over there, the one that you will hear most is Lingala, which is attributed to the Bangala people. But the Bakongo people, our language is Kikongo. And with Kikongo, you also need to look at what we call Royaume de Congo, the Congo Kingdom, which embodies Congo Kinshasa, Congo Brazza, Gabon, and Angola. So my family is actually directly removed from, we're like 2 generations from Angola. But even in being that closely removed to Angola, it's literally like where my family's village is right now as we speak. Angola is like a few kilometers away. And so the relationship is still very strong. It's just that the lines that were drawn by the Berlin Conference, really carved us up. But more importantly, to respond to the earlier question about spirituality and connection, what I remember very clearly was this connection to mass and the sound and the rhythm. Because when I was a child, while everyone was playing, whenever I heard the traditional music being played by people that were around our neighborhood, that was something that always, pulled me out. It made me leave my residence to go check out and really try to make sense of what was going on. And that I was forever drawn to everything that was traditional, even coming here to the United States, growing up here. My first inclination when it comes to music is listening to like Southern music, whether it's, even when they're like from other parts of the United States, like Chicago, Jay Blackfoot is coming from the South. That a lot of these artists they're still bringing that sense of who they are. When they brought it up north, I couldn't help but just be delighted to see how it morphed and evolved. And just the same for us. A lot of our contemporary music was influenced by Cuba, but it's kind of like being influenced by someone that was also influenced by you. And so it's this constant exchange that I really appreciate and adore about the connection with us all. And so yeah, I really love the fact that we're constantly recognizing ourselves in other forms and what other people are doing. They may not even be in the continent, but we see, there's something familiar with that. And so we're constantly, we're connected to everything. Just as conceptually, we're all different interpretations of each other,
And that's very true. But let me ask you to think about a couple of issues. Let's say what I find to be common among most African people is that we are into ancestral worship. And that's a technology, again, that I think is very important, because I know in my own life, I've used that to create ideas, or to find pathways to manifesting what it is I think my mission and purpose in the world is, right? Because I was in Cuba and I had a reading, and the Babala was telling me that I needed to connect with my maternal grandfather. And I followed up on some issues that just created a whole new portal for me. So the ancestral piece I'm very, very interested in, right? The divination piece is also a super technology that we don't do, because in the West, there's always been an association with demonic thinking. You know, the Christians are saying, what is it you're playing with? But that stuff is important in discovering new knowledge, right? So I don't know if you want to take that on to talk a little bit about that, the ancestral technology, and maybe a little bit about divination and how that plays into the work you're doing currently globally.
Here in the Americas, I'm a product of the Gullah Geechee people as well, Georgetown. So Ramona and I often tease that we're more than likely cousins. We just haven't checked the DNA yet. But here in America, I grew up in a family of spiritualists. Grandmother, who a lot of the distinguished personalities, Flip Wilson and many others, were clients. So when we talk about African culture and tradition, so often we're thinking of Africa across the waters, but not honoring the Africanisms that are right here. You know, I think one of the things with the colonial Western education we received is that everything that was indigenous to us as a people was perceived as being negative, or as you were saying, somehow demonic. But you had the people who wore white clothing in church, who had prayer meetings. In Cuba, there's spiritism. In Nigeria, there's Egungun worship. So we're not really far removed from the African traditions that our ancestors brought. One of the things I really love, I'm a frequent traveler to Cuba. One of the things I really love is that when I bring personalities from Yoruba land or from Africa to Cuba, one of the things they acknowledge is these are the things that our great-grandparents did. So one of the beautiful things about being on an island or being someone isolated, you're able to preserve a lot of the essence of what existed. And that's something that we don't necessarily have here. There are so many things that we honor that are not necessarily ours. And the Africanisms that you see a lot of the contemporary artists express, they're indeed African. And if you look at some of the ancient African art, you'll see a lot of the same symbolisms encoded. Divination is very much a part of what we do as a people in West Africa. When a child is born, a divination is done, as it's done in the Native American community, as it's done in China, in Japan. So we're not just given names. When you call a name, you're invoking a spirit within that entity. So you want to always invoke the purpose in which this spirit manifested into the earth and encourage them on the path that they're expressing. I'm not going to get into specifics of divination, but just know that it's nothing that's tarot that's very important. That's divination. So divination is expressed in many, many forms. It's just unfortunately, Africa is perceived as the dark continent. So when you think of divination with Africa, you think of something frightening. Ramona, how about in Gullah Geechee land? Did you have any experiences with divination growing up?
No, not per se. I guess it was more through dreams that I can remember. As you were talking, I was thinking about cultural retentions and how, our families, like I'll give you an example, like mirrors, right? So mirrors, I know in parts of West Africa, they're in costumes and so forth, and they play a certain role in reflection and deflection and so forth. But I know that back in the day, like when my grandfather died, they covered all the mirrors in the house. That was a traditional thing to do because it had to do with spiritual practice. And also the bodies, if you recall, stayed in the homes. They didn't go to, funeral parlors or undertakers. So that's one piece. The other piece is, when you were talking earlier, I was thinking about the Nkisi from the Bakongo. So the Nkisi are these, sometimes they might be a two-headed hippopotamus, but it has nails in it. And then on the top, it has like a mirror piece and medicine in it. So that's a technology. It's a ritual. But I remember my mother said that when her father was killed, she was 12. She was not allowed to go to the funeral because a nail had went into her foot. And she was told that if she went, it would never heal. So it was this connection to iron and how we, work with it, Ogun, so it's like really interesting to see how over the years, like horseshoes, that's universal. My grandmother had one over her door, and my mother had one over her door, and I have one over my door, and my sons have ones over their doors. It's just got kind of passed on, but again, it is, once again, it's iron, right? It's iron. The horseshoe maker was a really important person to have to take care of those horses' hooves, rather, right? So it's like these traditions that we send forth. And sometimes it's conscious and sometimes it's not. And in some places it's seen as superstitious, but some places it's not. I come from a people where they would put a collard green tied around their head for a headache because that's what they thought, that the herb helped with the headache. And we know that herbs do help us with our bodies. We know that. Medicines, compounds are made from herbs, basically. So does that help?
Well, it works. Yeah. Yeah.
Also, I would love to follow up on that because the piece that you described, Kisi, yes, means medicine. And so it's a common word for us in Lingala and Kikongo as well, because some words have the same sound, similar, but it's not always the same exact word when you go from Lingala to Kikongo. But regarding that piece, one of the things that many would not understand is that the iron pieces, and just to look at when it comes to the subject of iron in Africa, is really interesting in that when we talk about the foundation of the communications in the world, and we look at how telephones, the hard lines were the foundation before everyone moved on to cell phones. Interestingly enough, because it wasn't until it was the colonial powers that brought in the telephone lines, but because the regular people didn't have access to it, what you're going to see is similar to what happened earlier, centuries, thousands of years before, which is we didn't go through a Bronze Age. We went to iron directly. And so similar, and I only mention that to connect to the point that because a lot of people didn't have hard lines, we're going from not having hard lines to just straight cellular phones. So when I looked at that, I thought it's quite interesting in comparison in terms of like how we're able to stimulate to technology rather quickly. But to get back to the Kisi figurine, the metallic pieces represent punishment. And so it's not that when someone is punished in a village community, they're not punished in such a gruesome way, but you're cut, baluba kozoksa. So you're given a wound that is meant to be painful, but is not supposed to kill you. It's not meant to give you an illness, but it's meant to, you're supposed to feel that pain. And so with the figurines, the numerous, the volume of pieces is more symbolic, is not truly how people are punished. People are punished with one or two swipes, but in the figurines, we're putting a lot more. And so sometimes people confuse to get the idea that we're we're trying to like brutalize people in such a way. And yes, I know that sounds like a odd way of punishment, but it's just a matter of how certain tribes worked. Yeah, so that was quite interesting. Also, I was also interested in the Binde, which is it's a different tribal group, but that's more from the Katanga region, and that group of people, very strong culturally. I appreciate my people and where I come from, but at the same time, I'm always admiring everybody else, what everyone else is doing. So when people talk about diversity, I'm all for it. I don't need everybody to be the same. I'm all for appreciating the differences for everyone, in everyone. And so when you mentioned the Congolese ancestry, it's something that I too pay attention to. I notice it in pieces here and there. I know it's in the certain parts of the world, particularly in Colombia, Cuba, definitely in the US. You see parts of it in Haiti, parts of it in Guyana. And so there's so many other countries that have evidence of the Congo people. And so when I say the Congo people, you may not necessarily directly think people from the DRC. You have to really think the Congo Kingdom, because within the Congo Kingdom, we went through a lot of infighting. And so a lot of us that fought with the Bangala tribe, we ended up on the slave ships to Brazil, as a result of the infighting that we had within our own, group itself. But yeah, I hope I answered.
Yeah,
to a
that
degree.
does, and it might lead me into really talking more about African metaphysics, because to me, metaphysics is also very important in gaining knowledge about manifestation, right? And moving forward, I know when I work with kids in general, I'm always trying to get them to think out of the box about what's possible for them to know. And, we come from the origin of humanity. So clearly at the beginning, whatever we were doing, we were generating knowledge about physics and mathematics. It's all in us. We carry a host of information. But as I said, the transatlantic slavery piece really disconnected us. And it's good that we're now connecting to each other, because, I speak to Africa every day, right? If it's not Nigeria, it's South Africa or Ghana, just building community, and I'm learning from them and they're learning from me. And I think I'm very optimistic about Africa's future, right? And it's always an exciting adventure for me to really go back and look at our roots. So doing this is really very transformative and empowering, right? So with that said, I really want to see if I could get you to talk about Ifa a little bit more in terms of the Orishas. I'm always interested in, and on a very surface level, I use them a lot in my life. But is that something that you find yourself constantly sharing with this community? Is it something that is really central to your super being, your supernatural being?
Well, growing up as a metaphysician, metaphysics beyond the physical. And so you're open to the limitless resources and energies of the universe. As I grew older, I was exposed to the Ifa divination system of West Africa. And through the Ifa, or called Fa in the French regions, basically you're looking at the cardinal points, the 4 directions. You can see astrology encoded. But what it teaches you is that there are 256 major circumstances or instances of life. And when you're consulted by a priest, The opon is used. Sometimes if it's a Isheshe person and not an Ifa person, they will use cowrie shells. And based upon how these shells fall or the apparatus that's used, there's a corresponding story. And not only is it a story, but also the medicine that's necessary to bring about the necessary balance in your life to deal with psycho-social circumstances, economic circumstances. But so beyond the New Age thought of astrology or tarot, not only are your circumstance is revealed, but also the prescription to bring about balance. And that's a universal art that's been practiced for thousands of years all over Africa.
Very true. What's kind of interesting too is that the binary codes were being used by Ifa, and that's how the world got onto the idea of computer technology. Could you believe that? I mean, there's a lot of research being done on that now by MIT, and Moyo Okodiji from the University of Texas is involved in that project. So again, the art thing is not something that you should take lightly. Thank you. You know, there is so much spiritual resources, right, that can come from art, right? And I've been on the planet for a little while, but I feel like I'm just beginning to learn a little bit more about spiritual technologies, because again, my interpretation is that everything is energy, you know, and if we can connect to what I call source energy, most of what I produce is coming from me being in divine flow, right? So doing a show like this, where I was working on doing the research, and God, there's so much diversity in Africa. I mean, you know, in terms of language and aesthetics and all of that, you know, and it's something that I think the world, well, we know that in the contemporary space, Africa has a tremendous impact on modern culture, right? But we still don't know enough. And in doing the research, I found out that resources like Google, they don't have that database. They don't know anything about African people. And a lot of the assumptions that they're making are not correct, right? And I find that the spirit world is going to be, I can't wait until AI tries to figure out how to explore the spiritual world, because that to me is really about the vastness of the multiverse. You know, we live on a little planet. There's so many galaxies. This is like, you know, there's so much to even being a human being in this body. We have 37 trillion cells. That's not a simple thing, right? But the way to live well and in balance really comes from the spiritual piece. I would think. I don't know if you agree. But, you know, I don't know if you want to talk more about African metaphysics from that perspective, either of you. Do you as people who deal with art all the time, or even as it relates to the exhibition?
I was thinking about metal workers. For some reason, it's coming to my spirit, particularly blacksmiths and the ironwork once again. So, you know, we have people like Philip Simmons, who was from Charleston, South Carolina, a major blacksmith. And his grandson, Dr. Ade Afunyan, God rest his soul, did a lot of work with ancestors and cemeteries. We did work there where we reinterred, after doing DNA on bones. We found 36 African skeletal remains downtown Charleston under, they were getting ready to do the new Gilliard Auditorium. And the city of Charleston wanted to just put them in another Black cemetery somewhere else. And Dr. O led the community fight and said, no. We will see who these people are, we will investigate, and they will be reinterred. So that first happened in 2013, and in 2018, we were able to reinter those 36 skeletal remains after taking DNA and finding out whether they had been born in Charleston or what part of West Africa. Then we took it a step further and connected with National Geo, University of Pennsylvania, and we did DNA studies for any Gullah Geechee person living in Charleston that wanted to be tested to see if we could find some connections. So this whole idea, and I got a little off a tangent, but I want to go back to his grandfather. Philip Simmons was roots back to Barbados. So there's a really strong tie between Barbados and Charleston. In 1670, the British that ran out of space after they colonized Barbados, there was no more room after all the sugar plantations, and they needed land for their sons. So they moved over to Charleston, and they formed Charlestown. The Carolina used to be one. It was first Carolina. It wasn't North and South. And so they came, and with them, they brought their slave codes from Barbados. They brought the names of streets, or what we call gaps. So, for example, Hort Gap Middle School. Well, Hort is an actual street back in Barbados. It's a gap. They also brought their family names. So a lot of those people, the Draytons, the Middletons, and so forth, you go to Barbados today, there's Drayton Hall, there's Drayton Hall in Charleston, those sorts of things. So there's a serious connection genealogically as well as culturally. But Philip Simmons was an amazing blacksmith, and he worked well until his 90s. He died at 98. And the power that blacksmiths had going back to the motherland was like a high power. They were leaders. The artisans were really major people, the woodworkers, the mask makers, people that worked in leather and other sorts of metals. That, they were considered to be higher beings spiritually because they were more in touch with the earth. When you're working with the clay and the earth and so forth, it's something about, it's like when you work in your garden, it's empowering, So it's only in America that we feel that artists have to be a special person. When we go all around the rest of the world, everybody creates. And they don't have a title of artist, they just create. But here it's like, you have to be this, you have to go to art school, or whatever. But around the world, people are creating every day. I mean, going to Africa just to see what people make, even in Cuba, people make a way out of no way. That's our saying. We make a way out of no way. We take things that people, may toss aside. And, I was in Ghana last Christmas and I saw a trash can made out of plastic bottles. It was like, oh, that's an interesting recycle thing, So it's like, the records, right? When we went in Cuba, the LP records were placemats in the restaurant, or, so it's like, it's a different mindset. Thank you, genius, yes. And, I know it's right brain, left brain and all that, but it's like, it's just about shifting. It's about a shift, a cultural and a creative shift that we all have and can do. So don't think that, I can't draw, so I can't do art. That's what I tell my folks in my creative group that I meet with. It's like, we're not here for the product, we're here for the process. Go with the flow and enjoy the process of creation and see what happens.
And that's really my sense is why we're here as spirit and human beings, really, is to be creative, because we are all contributing to the evolution of being, in minor ways, but in significant ways. And as I said, I think Black people are amazing, based on, what we did bring to the world from the very beginning, and we were still bringing to the world, despite the victimization that we have to go through just to survive on the planet, right? We come from the richest planet on the continent on the planet, but we're the poorest. How does that work? The Congo is the richest material country in the world. You have everything, right? And it's one of the quote poorest countries in the world when you look at GDP per capita, right? Something is not right with that. But I think some of it is our responsibility. You know, we have to go back to the spiritual piece, right? And when we do, I see, this is why I love working with artists. You know, I love putting projects together with artists because they inspire me. We have to come from a space where we have to be reinventing ourselves, recreating ourselves, and we have the spiritual foundation and resources to do it. You know what I mean? So go ahead.
So I would like to add a bit to that. Spirituality is beyond important because it's part of what centers you to figure out that balance between your ego, your spiritual self, the community. And the reason why I mentioned this is because sometimes we need to put in not a bit more, but a lot more work for our own development. And this is not to contradict any ideas of political leanings, but all of this falls on us. The reason why Africa is the way it is my fault. It's really my fault. And I hope that some of my countrymen see that it's their fault too. It's my fault. It's their fault. What I understand is that we need to take full responsibility because part of the reason why it's unnerving to hear some of the rhetoric about our political standings, our social standings, is because far too many of us are really comfortable under rulership. You know, get real comfortable under being ruled by another group. And I know that at some point, all the masses of people of the planet will eventually have to converge and work under one cohesive, mesh. But right now, as it stands, I can't be comfortable because to be comfortable means that I'm comfortable under rulership here. And so I would like to see a lot more frustration and anger, not with the outside, but with us, So when I see when I see an IMF deal for construction project, I'm like, okay, it's probably not the best deal in the world, but why is 80% of that going into your friends' pockets? So I'm continuing to see that we have a combination. We're missing a critical mass of people we're lacking the critical mass of those that have the strength, the intellect, and the heart for our communities. We have a lot of people that have the intellect, but neither the strength. We have people with the heart, but probably not the intellect. Or we never seem to have enough of the three, but we require a critical mass. It doesn't mean everybody and their mama, but that critical mass used to be the talented tenth. But this is also part of the reason why we have such a frustration with our upper class, community members. Our frustration is not so much the class issue. Our frustration is the leadership that allowed us to go off on a tangent. So the leadership has to come from those that see what's wrong. And so if we are required to center ourselves and organize ourselves spiritually, if that's what you need, then so be it. Embrace it, take it on. But I just can't. I can't take on any more language about what we can't do, because it's almost like we're feeding into the the gibberish about.
But that's
what
the
we're
that's
lacking.
the work you're doing. In some ways, I feel when I'm working with the community in the arts, I'm really working on the spiritual piece, right? And I love to have the conversations after I do shows, because it helps to unpack why this is important, to come and consume, to look at the ideas, and then to go back and do some research. But it doesn't have to be academic. It can be personalized, right? Because if you just focus in on, originally, I love the Nigerian people. I really love them, as crazy as they are, because they're so creative, you know what I mean? And in some ways, the most brilliant people I know on the planet, you know what I mean? When it comes to art, science, everything, it's really amazing. You know, Lagos is one of the most creative places on earth, to me, you know what I mean? Far more exciting than Paris and London and, do you know what I mean? Tokyo or whatever, right? But we've bought so much into Western imperial ideas, and we've caved in, actually, you know, because a lot of times we're aspiring to be more European, right? So, you know, I'm so pleased that you arranged to have me have the show here, Ramona, you know, because it's going to be here for a year, so it would be nice to do more of this. We're coming to an end, but I want to give an opportunity for the audience to interact a little bit. Phyllis, you wanted to ask a question?
May I just say one thing, Eleanor? I just wanted to take a moment to give thanks to the Friends of the African American Research Library. They paid for your refreshments tonight, so we want to acknowledge the Friends. We also, I think a couple of them that were here have left already, but I just wanted you to know that. And also, they're always looking for members, so if you want to become a friend member, please let us know. We'll get you that QR code, okay? Thank you.
Good afternoon, evening, everyone. Thank you for such an amazing panel discussion. I'm like you, Ludlow. I'm really interested in the spiritual piece and spiritual technology, and I find that our culture is so rich in it. You alluded to the fact of dreams. And back in the day, I'm a little girl, I would dream of things that would happen the next day or the next week. And people would come to the house, my mother, who was an evangelist, and they would look at all of the children, and they said, that child, she's born with a veil over her eyes. Understanding that they had a sense of discernment. They could look at you and tell you what was wrong with you, spiritually, psychologically, physically, and would go to the bush and get something for your healing. In the Pentecostal church that my mother was a part of, I witnessed miraculous healing, that we believe that we have so much power and energy in us that we can touch someone. We can lay hands on them and they will become healed. I mean, our culture is just so full of it, so full of it. We could see, but not using these. We could hear without using these. And many times it was generated in a setting where music was involved, where strong power words were being spoken, and we were energized through that. Zora Neale Hurston said the most flamboyant part of African American spirituality is the possession piece. And as I've traveled through Africa and through Haiti and Brazil, there is a commonality. There's a commonality when people are endowed with this power. Oh, we've lost it. We have it. But we need to learn how to bring it back, how to raise it up. We've become dead. We have no power, no strength. What happened to us?
All right, Iman. Imani there's another question.
All right.
Fantastic contribution,
Right,
fantastic. So,
But dreams, we
Yeah.
need to explore that and going really deep into our spirituality.
yes.
Not just talking spirituality, but feeling it, living it, embodying it.
Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. In the back, Imani.
Okay. Peace and love, everybody. Assalamu alaikum. What's up? Alafia and Wagwan. All right, we didn't cover everybody. My answer to you is the youth, the young people. When they understand, they get the spirit. They really can transition forward. So my question to you all of you who I adore so much, everything is not for social media. So how do we keep things sacred so we can move forward in that way? That's my question. Because I know, I see a lot of young people, they done found out about Oshun, and now they got a yellow candle and they got some peacock feathers, and now they are priestess of Oshun. And they have no idea about tradition. And so can you all speak to that? Thank you.
If you notice, Imani, as much as Brother Ludlow tried to probe me, well, we have our societies, like in America, you have the everything. I don't want to start calling them out, but tradition is passed from mouth to ear. Most of our significant rituals, practices were never documented. And this is how the true keepers of culture preserve history, knowledge, and tradition. It's extended to those who are chosen to carry the light and to not talk, but walk the path. So what's important is we return to tradition.
I try to answer that too. I think that documentation is important, and even when it comes to Ifa, there's so much more scholarship being engaged now. People are writing, not that they don't have a written literature, that's not the issue, but it's like sharing the information, right? Especially with our younger people, because they're even being more disconnected now from any real spiritual food. I look at my own kids, right? And, it's Instagram. A flash of idea, right? No substance, right? And a lot of them are being led down the wrong path, right? And spirituality in our community is not something we talk a lot about, even in the churches, it's the same thing, right? I mean, it's not easy to access information about Ifa because of the way it's structured too. But that's something that I think institutions like this can play a part in, right? This is a sacred place to me, right? It's like a temple in Luxor, Valley of the Kings. It's a beautiful experience, and just doing this is consistent with our tradition. I think, in Kemet, we actually got together quite often to talk about metaphysical ideas,
If I may also follow up on that, I do agree also about the transmission, preservation, conservation of our cultures, knowledge, technologies is beyond critical for our development and just for us to exist. But more importantly, part of what continues to also be frustrating is the observance of how information did not get to everyone. When we look at the continent, most people can really just point to a couple of places on the map, and culturally, the only place that they really look at would be Egypt. Now, this is not to say that is bad, but my frustration with the focus on Egypt is that there's there's a vast wealth of information underground on the rest of the continent that we don't have our own researchers to unearth. I would love to see linguists between the United States, Caribbean, South America, and Africa working, in tandem to explore that footprint that we left in the way that we speak from region to region. So again, this goes right back to us doing the work for ourselves, making sure that we're investing in ourselves. So yes, when that frustration that I noticed from the beginning is when we heard stories about the advancements of medieval or ancient African cultures, what I also observed was that information didn't get to the rest of the continent. So what prevented that access for all of us? So these are some of the things that we're still tackling today. We must figure out how to resolve all these countless issues. And it goes right back to the notion that if we understand ourselves spiritually, I think we'll also know that the answer is not far, it's within us. By the way, I think I got that from CeeLo Green.
I also wanted to say that when you just talked about a linguist that could go around, Lorenzo Dow Turner. If you don't know his name, look him up, because he was one of those people that did that, many years ago.
Yes.
But also, I think the commitment, Imani, to us as what I call young elders, to bring in younger people to rooms like this. Like, everyone that comes to a program should be bringing a young person with them. So too often, all institutions across the world, not just in America, are suffering from a lack of young people, whether it's, nonprofits, or whether it's, the friends or whomever. We have to make a commitment to bring young people into the folds.
I have a question. Well, actually, a statement. Yeah, I know they're looking all around the room. I'm hidden behind the beam. Good evening, everybody. My apologies first and foremost for being late. It's always a privilege to see a panel of all my mentors doing good stuff and saying good things. I'm going to address the last 4 things I heard in the room. I'm going to start with a lady that spoke about being sacred. We're going to forget about that for a minute. We speak so much about the sacred and what we do as a people, and you just touched on it. If we're so concerned about keeping things sacred, we're going to forget posterity. We're going to lose an entire generation. I listened to a young lady give a talk a few months ago, and she said that, what if AI is just the new name for the Akashic records? And it blew my mind. Yeah, it really blew my mind. And I was like, those are the conversations we need to be having, because if we speaking about holding things within the village, a village, unfortunately, that is transitioning, and no one is passing the knowledge to the youth, we already dead. This is a mistake that happened before that we can't repeat. So when we speak about sacred, we have to trust the new generation for what they consider sacred. What we hold sacred and what they hold sacred are 2 entirely different things. We cannot denounce one and lift the other up without truly understanding them. It's like you just mentioned, the 4 panels should have 4 youth in the conversation at the same time. But we keep dropping that ball over and over again. in my platform for African and what we do, we try to include the youth so much because if we don't, we failing. You know, we have failed. I speak to my parents all the time and I tell them, y'all failed not because of what you did, because they didn't know either, because we keep doing the generation gap. We keep holding and protecting and say, no, they ain't ready for that yet. They ain't ready for that yet. And by the time they get ready, it already passed. The window is gone because technology ain't waiting for no one. So the IGs that we knock in and the TikToks, that's where they're at. We got to meet them where they're at. We got to have these conversations. This is why I went live, because I want my audience to hear this. Because I just found out about this from Dr. Hobbs. She sent me a message and I got it and I was like, okay, I need to be here. You know, I ran late, but my first thing was to go live so my audience could hear this because they need to know it exists.
Yeah,
So
good,
we need to
great
do more of
thing.
that.
And just for the record, we are taping this and it's live streamed. Yes, so that it's going to be shared. In my community, I have lots of Nigerians listening to this, and you know, people in the islands and blah blah. So it's we're trying. And
Doing, not
and
trying.
most of the time, you know this. When I was doing the show, I have interns working with me, younger people. I always try to include them. You know what I mean? Not doing a good job, but you know, I know I share this information with my youth community. And as I said, you're spot on. We need to make sure that they're more engaged. Yeah. Yeah. All right. We're out of time. Thank you for your contribution, African. Thank you for coming. I knew you had many other things to do. Jamil, you wanted to ask a question? Yeah.
Is it possible that from now on we can restructure to have these types of things on a weekend when families can attend, and then we can bring our youth groups to be part of this? Because this was really hard, you know, unless you're rich, you own your own business, to get here at 5:30 is kind of impossible. I just happen to be rich.
We're happy you are.
No, but really, the timing is important, you know, like Alfonso said, but it's also about timing. When you get people here, when it's convenient to them versus what's convenient.
No comment.
Well, we did it at 5:30 to feed you this evening.
This was really excellent, and I mean, I've been here for a lot of different programs, but this particular exhibit touches all of us. And it needs to be seen by all of us, not just those of us in this room. So I just need to put that out.
Well, I'm glad you're doing, and the library's hearing. And you know, I know you're very involved in youth, so we need. It's going to be here for a year, so hopefully we can pull that off.
Thank you, but as we don't have too much time, first of all, I would like to thank you for all of your comments. But more importantly, he said something, I believe it's Bayunga. Yes, you mentioned something about information, and I'm with you on that. Information is power. Specifically, when you mentioned Egypt, a lot of times, and it's great when they're talking about African culture, Egypt always part of it. But at the meantime, they always focus on Egypt as the main figure of Africa. As you were saying, I believe the lack of to really see the broad Africa. For example, Ethiopia, at certain times, Egypt were a colony of Ethiopia. Not too many people knowing of Ethiopia as a figure, a big time in Africa culture. Nothing wrong, they mentioned Egypt, and as you mentioned, they can learn a lot. But when we're talking about Africa, they need to go further, like Botswana. Scientifically speaking, this is the first place they found human being. I'm beyond of complexion. Botswana, the first place, if we're talking about human beings, but if we go on a religious purpose, it Adam and Eve, we can say that's where they were. But you do not find too many names of those countries. Nothing wrong by citing Egypt, okay, it's part, but this is not Africa. Africa is bigger than that. And the only way we will come back to really get a true understanding of Africa, We have to go to the origins, not what society want us to know about Africa. And a lot of ways that Egypt, it's a mixed bag because Egypt is part of Northern Africa, okay? But this is part of Africa. I did just want to mention that, and I think that was very key when you mentioned in information. If we really want to get to the power of humanity, this is how I see myself, we're a human being first, but to really put Africa where it's supposed to be as the mother of all civilization, we have to go to the roots, to the origin of Africa. Therefore, I think that was great to mention Egypt is not necessarily the greatest figure of representing Africa. We have to go to the origin. But again, thank you.
Thank you. I want to remind people to make sure you, if you didn't sign in when you came, that you do as you leave. Thank you.
Alafia, everyone. I want to greet everyone. Alafia. Assalamu alaikum. Sapase. And hola. And a few other ones my daughters are teaching me. Thank you. The children must be at our feet. As a child, I sat at my great-grandmother's feet. And she did not want me to hear everything, but my ears were big, and I was very nosy. And I was always there. If I was not at her feet, I was sitting at the door listening to what was going on. I had the privilege of hearing the elders of my family speak. At the age of 7, I was tracing my own ancestry, trying to find out where my father was, why he was not there. Where was my mother? Why was she not there? My grandparents raised me. But because of how they raised me, I am here today. I am here with a title that was given to me from the Yoruba nation of the United States of America. Why? Because I'm curious, because I'm nosy, because I want to ask questions, and because I have learned to listen at an early age. The teacher used to tell me, Sheila, shut up. We talking now. I said, oh, okay, I'll be quiet. She would have to call me out to make me be quiet to listen. And I learned to listen from the 3rd grade on. Our children must learn to listen. They're very impatient, they're fidgety, but we must teach them how to sit and listen at our feet and learn to be tall, to be strong, and they will get all the gifts there to have in their life. Everyone here should have a child sitting with them at their feet. I love the Chief Nathaniel Styles. Everywhere we go together, I see he brings his nephew, his grandnephew, his twins, his babies, all for these beautiful ladies who have given birth to them.
We have Prince and Megan here tonight, so I have young people in mind.
Yes, he has younger people already here at his feet, and his sister, and his niece, and his son-in-law. Everyone is here because they have learned from children to listen. It is our responsibility to make them listen. Turn off the TV, take off the iPhone, the Android, or whatever, and they must listen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Irite, just 2 minutes. Tell them about the book you just completed, the significance of it, Seeds of Awakening.
Thank you. I have just completed with my editor a book called The Seeds of Awakening, the creation of the Oyotunji African Kingdom in Sheldon, South Carolina. It's 45 minutes from Hilton Head. It's 55 miles from Savannah, Georgia, and it's 65 miles from Charleston, South Carolina. We're all Geechee Gullah people, whether we know it or not. And this gentleman, Oba Osageman Adefumi I, came from Detroit, Michigan, the black bottom of Detroit, Michigan. His father was a Garveyite. His mother was a Baptist Sunday school teacher at Hamilton Baptist Church in Detroit, Michigan. He was inspired as a young age to draw African pyramids and just things that he wanted to do. And as a young man, he saw his father follow Marcus Garvey and run behind the ships. And he said, why are you doing that? His father said, because we want to be free. We want to be free. And he has created this community so that we can do what we want to do, when we want to do it, how we want to do it, play our drums all night long and dance till the sun comes up if we want to. It's in the Yoruba village of South Carolina. Everyone is welcome, not just Yoruba people. Everyone is welcome. Even our Santeria brothers and sisters have come down and made a contribution, and we appreciate that. And we had also visited Matanza, where he was initiated to the god Obatala, Orishala, in Matanzas, Cuba. And his godfather told him, your father is standing over your head. He says, you are not the son of Shango, you're the son of Obatala, because if we give you to Shango, you will burn down your own palace. He said, oh, well, okay, whatever you decide to put there, I will accept. And he did, and he has done wonderful work. And the village now is going on 58 years old. I have lived in Miami
Sure,
Gardens
okay.
for 26 years, and I have 6 grandchildren born here in Florida. I come from where? I'm a Jersey girl. I'm a Jersey girl. I came from New York to South Carolina to here. And it's been quite a journey. I'm not tired yet, so you'll hear more from me very soon. Thank you.
Escucheo.
Seen on Oprah, as also seen on Oprah.
Yes,
The only traditional village in this country.
yes, yes, we are.
Escucheo. Yeah.
Thank you, Baba. Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
thank you. All right, with that
Thank
said, we could mull around for another 15 minutes, or we gotta
Thank you, sir.
we gotta wrap it up, yeah.
10 minutes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all
everyone.
for coming, and I hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, thank you.